Hello everybody, this is Fernando for the latest Mafia and Gangsters video. Well, I had such a great time reading that new book, Super Mafia, Organized Crime Threatens America by Jonathan Harris the other day that I thought I would continue this chapter 1, but this time showcase part 2. And then that way it'll give a good idea to everyone, essentially again, of what this book will entail. Really good, rich information so far when it comes to the world of the Mafia. This is the kind of stuff that I was looking for when I do my videos and I showcase things associated with certain topics or certain members of the Mafia. Here, though, it's going to place everything all under one book, but throughout several different chapters. And again, it's great commentary and it's a great opportunity for me to be able to revisit some items and then also showcase some new things here. So let's go ahead and let's continue with chapter 1, part 2. This one, once again, going over the chapter associated with the Mafia Empire. And then I was in that segment associated with anatomy of the Mafia. So here's this next part here. The Commission's powers are limited. Its main function is to keep peace within the organization. Considering the bloody record of gang warfare that has scarred the Mafia's whole history, the Commission has been less than totally effective. Chicago alone has seen 1,882 gangland killings since the Chicago Crime Commission started keeping records in 1919. Nevertheless, the Commission does play an important role. It has settled some potentially explosive disputes between families. One common cause of trouble has been the tendency of certain families to muscle in on others' territory. Crises have also tended to develop when a reigning boss has been clipped, i.e. murdered, convicted and sentenced to the joint, i.e. prison, or forced into retirement. In such cases, the Commission has usually had a strong advisory voice as to his replacement, but it has no say whatsoever about the family's internal affairs. Inside any family's territories, as long as nothing is done, there might be damage that the others, each family operating according to the dictates of its own capo. For example, a boss's decision to clip any mafioso of his own family requires no commission okay, but clipping a member of somebody else's family does. The Mafia, then, is a loosely run and highly informal outfit. That fact has led some observers to question where it really rates being thought of as a nationwide organization at all. And it is true that many Americans find it hard to believe that any such monstrous group can possibly exist outside of books, movies, and TV. This controversy was vividly dramatized during a 1983 trial in Chicago. The main defendant was Roy L. Williams, president of the powerful International Brotherhood of Teamsters, the largest union in the United States. After a long and complicated trial, Williams and 3 co-defendants were convicted of attempting to bribe a U.S. senator. The prosecution showed that Williams had been under mafia control for many years. He was sentenced to 55 years in prison. Presiding over the trial was federal district judge Prentice H. Marshall, who had been described as one of the most respected members of the federal bench. He came to this case with strong doubts about the mafia's existence. The judge often teased and taunted the prosecutors, scoffing particularly at their frequent references to the slimy tentacles of organized crime. But as the trial moved forward with the evidence mounting undeniably, Judge Marshall's attitude began to shift. In the end, he declared to a hushed courtroom that he'd been convinced clearly, unequivocally, and beyond a reasonable doubt that the Mafia was all too real. It is hard to see how anyone with an open mind who considers the plain facts with reasonable care can come to any other conclusion. Next segment is called The Other Italians. The Mafia image, says Queens College professor Richard Gambino, has been a cross laid across the shoulders of every Italian American for upwards of a full century. Yet the Mafia is decidedly not typical of the Italian American population. About 22 million Americans are of Italian descent. They make up about 9% of the population. The few thousand mafioso get most of the publicity, but they obviously constitute only a tiny fraction of the Italian American population of the United States. Italian immigrants began to arrive in this country in large numbers in the 1880s. By 1920, 4 million had entered, coming as most of them did from the most backward and poverty-stricken rural areas of southern Italy and Sicily. They arrived with crushing handicaps. From the start, the newcomers faced blatant forms of prejudice and discrimination. Native-born Americans looked down on them as ignorant, uncouth, probably unsanitary, and possibly dangerous. Since then, Italian Americans have struggled to surmount the barriers and move forward. A remarkable number have made it, achieving success in many fields. A recent cover of the New York Times Magazine graphically demonstrated their achievements. Its 16 portrait sketches of prominent Italian Americans comprise an impressive sampling. Award-winning movie director Martin Scorsese, Mario M. Cuomo, governor of New York, Salvador E. Luria, Nobel laureate in medicine, Eleanor Kutry Smil, for 5 years president of the National Organization for Women, Lee A. Iacocca, chairman of the Chrysler Corporation, Joseph V. Vittoria, president of the Avis Corporation, Representative Geraldine A. Ferraro, Democrat of New York, Robert Venturi, the father of postmodernism in architecture, Joseph Cardinal Bernardin, Archbishop of Chicago, and the first Italian American to attain the rank of cardinal, Bartlett Glamati, president of Yale University, and U.S. Senators Pete V. Domenici and Alphonse D. Amato. By 1979, Italian Americans had attained a median family income of nearly $17,000. They were outlearning all other ethnic groups except the Scots and the Germans, who arrived in this country well ahead of them. Success still does not mean complete acceptance, though. Today's Italian Americans continue to face obstacles of many sorts. Just how persistent anti-Italian prejudice remains is shown by the curious fact that no exact count can be made of the Italian American population. An unknown number feel compelled to avoid discrimination by changing their last names and thus concealing their ethnic origin. The media have helped perpetuate this prejudice by constantly projecting the Mafia image. An example was the extremely popular TV series The Untouchables, which ran in the 1950s and the early 1960s. It depicted the spectacular but mostly fictional exploits of government agents hunting down mafia mobsters who were portrayed in a grossly stereotyped manner. Similar effects were produced more recently by the two most popular movies ever made, The Godfather Part 1 and The Godfather Part 2. Based on the best-selling novel by Mario Puzo, these films of the 1970s dramatized the rise and the fall of a mafia chieftain. The damage was summed up in a New York Times editorial published shortly after The Godfather's 1972 premiere. It said, "No one denies that a few Italian Americans are gangsters, but for the millions of Italian Americans who are not gangsters, the success of this film raises an enormous cultural obstacle. It retards their efforts to establish positive heroes for their children to emulate." Such protests have been echoed by many distinguished Americans and by a wide range of organizations that strive to promote positive intergroup relations in American society. They have failed to prevent the Godfather films from being transferred to television and broadcast repeatedly. They are currently shown in a new expanded version that runs for 9 hours spread over several evenings. TV critic Marvin Kurtman is one of those who have denounced these showings. He says, "I think Italian Americans have endured enough from TV. The Godfather, all 9 hours of it, is offensive and derogatory. Today, Italians are no more numerous among American criminals than members of other ethnic groups. When other minorities have suffered deprivations like those borne by the newcomers from Italy and Sicily, they have produced equally high and sometimes higher number of lawbreakers." David Margolis, chief of the Organized Crime and Racketeering Section in the U.S. Department of Justice, put it this way: "Organized crime has never been confined to any single segment of society. Individuals of every race, religion, nationality, and ethnic background are involved in organized crime. America's Italian citizenry has furnished many of the investigators, prosecutors, and legislators who have done the most to fight the mafia. A forceful example of their feelings was the reply hurled by Sergeant Ralph Salerno of the New York City Police Department at a mobster who was in police custody. Salerno was already a widely recognized expert on the mafia. He later wrote numerous books and articles on the subject. The mafioso, noting Salerno's Italian origin, origin protested, "Why does it have to be one of your own kind that hurts you?" And Saloma retorted, "I'm not your kind, and you're not my kind. My manners, morals, and mores are not yours. The only thing we have in common is that we both spring from an Italian heritage and culture, and you are the traitor to that heritage and culture, which I am proud to be part of." Then that's it. That pretty much ends chapter 1 of the book Super Mafia, Organized Crime Threatens America by Jonathan Harris. Let's talk about that here. So it pretty much again talked about the commission and then how their powers are. They're kind of there, but they're loose at the same time. It is important to remember that even though it's a representation of the heads of the family, they each run their own families, and each one cannot really tell the other what to do, at least according to what this segment was stating. They control their own families, they dictate their own families, but once again, they can't really tell others what to do unless there's some kind of grievance that's being done or some other harm that's being done. I imagine that's where they start stepping in. And then it was interesting to note, too, that you can clip anyone you want within your own family. Obviously, if you probably have to get permission from the family as well, but you don't need any other permission from the families to do that too. But we've seen several notable examples of how that has even caused some stirring when it comes to the world of the mafia. Like, in other words, the death of Paul Castellano, and then how John Gotti basically had that situation be an in-family war. I remember reading some of that within some of the videos that I chronicled as well. And then there was that interesting notion about the trial that pretty much brought the mafia to America, like the real mafia. It was there, it was televised, and it showcased the Judge Prentice H. Marshall, how he was clearly at the beginning stating that he did not think there was anything along with the mafia, about it being, something that existed. And now, by the time the trial ended, he realized clearly, unequivocally, and beyond the reasonable doubt that it was all too real. And then that was essentially what had caused the mafia to come more towards the forefront. And then the segment ended with the mafia image, how you had the Godfather movies essentially make it how it made it seem like all Italian Americans were almost like that, but obviously they weren't. But the movies were so popular that people started to think that, and it became like a blemish. And as you saw, some of the examples, people there were stating that it was more on the lines of derogatory stuff. But there they were, essentially still, even to this day, being very prominent films. And first thing you think of Italians, like when it comes to movies, is the Mafia. You can't think of anything else because of those films. So for better or for worse, they pretty much painted that image. And the book was stating that they've had to fight. The Italian industry have had to fight that image ever since then. There was, like 6 million or 22 million Americans of Italian descent, and only a couple of thousand of them are the mafia. But clearly they in turn created such a broad image that too many people were thinking of everyone as mafia members. But let me know what you guys think. Next segment is going to be chapter 2, and now it's going to focus on some juicy details inside the mafia, how to become a mafioso. It's going to be great stuff. All right, everybody. Thanks again as always. Take care.